The elevator doors trembled under a single light bulb that refused to die. Somewhere in the marble silence of Levington Tower, a man was humming. A wrench turned, a cable snapped into place, and an elevator that had defied every expert for weeks suddenly came to life. From the shadows, billionaire Charles Levington stopped walking. His reflection glimmered across the chrome doors as they slid open, smooth and perfect. And kneeling there with sweat on his forehead and a faded blue uniform clinging to his arms was a janitor, a black man. "Alone at midnight! You shouldn't be here this late," the billionaire said, voice cold, clipped. "Sir," the man replied, never breaking eye contact. "I am maintenance tonight." The silence between them was heavy enough to echo. Then the elevator chimed, a single clean note that filled the lobby like truth. Charles turned away, but something in that quiet determination followed him home, sitting in his chest like a splinter. Because in a tower of gold and glass, power had just met patience, and before the night was over, only one of them would walk away unchanged. The first sound was not the storm outside, not the traffic far below, not the endless hum of a city that never sleeps. It was a small, stubborn clang, metal speaking to metal, a soft knock from inside the bones of the building, like a heartbeat that refused to quit. Charles Levington heard it and felt his jaw tighten. This was his tower. His name sat in gold above the revolving doors. His elevator was supposed to glide like silk. It was past midnight and he was ready to leave, to drift home high above the river, to forget about the meetings and the markets and the war of numbers that had taken all of his day. But the elevator had jammed again, and that clang would not stop. He pushed open the heavy glass doors to the lobby and stepped into a pool of amber light. The marble floor stretched out like a quiet lake. The air was cool and clean. The building slept, but the sound kept beating from the elevator shaft, steady, patient, almost human. He saw him then, a black janitor in a faded blue uniform kneeling by the broken doors, a tool bag open like a small mouth beside him. The man's hands were strong and careful. His forearms glowed with sweat. He hummed a low tune, something soft and old, and the rhythm of it seemed to keep time with the tapping of his wrench. He had placed a wedge at the base of the door and was feeling along the seam with 2 fingers, listening for a click only he could hear. The billionaire stopped at the edge of the light, watching. He did not clear his throat. He did not announce himself. He stood the way kings stand, expecting the room to sense them. "You shouldn't be here this late," Charles said finally, his voice calm, empty of thanks. The words floated out and landed like ice. "Call maintenance." He glanced at the clock. He hated waste, time, money, movement. This scene was all 3. The man looked up. His eyes were steady and kind. He didn't flinch at the tone. He did not rush to explain. He set the wrench down carefully, as if not to wake the building. "Sir," he said, "I am maintenance tonight." The words were simple. No anger, no sting. Only fact. For a moment, nothing happened. The lobby was a cathedral of quiet. The storm outside pressed its face against the glass and sighed. Somewhere far above, a light flickered. Charles let his mouth tilt at one corner, like a man who knows a joke the other man doesn't. He turned away. He could buy a new elevator. He could buy a new lobby. He could buy a new building. He took 3 slow steps, the sound of his leather soles clicking on marble like a small clock, counting down to nothing. Then the machine behind him breathed. The motor caught. A low purr rose from the shaft, grew, opened its throat. The doors shivered, then slid apart with the smoothness of a secret. The interior lights glowed to full. The panel chimed one clean note. It all worked perfectly, as if it had never failed, as if it had been waiting for this pair of hands. Charles stopped walking. He didn't mean to, but his feet did not move. The janitor had already begun gathering his tools, wiping the steel with a rag, making the elevator neat as a gift. He wasn't smiling at the win. He wasn't looking for eyes. He was already working on the next small thing, the next quiet fix no one would notice. That was when it happened, a feeling like a tiny splinter sliding beneath the skin of Charles's chest. It did not hurt, not yet, but it lodged in a place he did not know had been soft. "What is your name?" Charles asked, not turning around, as if the question might look like praise if he added a face to it. The man paused for the first time. He stood up slowly and kept his voice mild. "Samuel, sir." "Samuel Brooks." Charles nodded once, like a judge noting a fact that would not change the sentence. He stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor, the private floor, the one only his keycard knew. The doors began to close, and he watched the man through the thin, shrinking slice of light. The uniform was faded at the elbows. The collar had a careful stitch where it had once torn. The man's shoes were clean. Not new, not fine. Just clean, the way a person keeps what is theirs with pride. The doors met in silence and sealed away the sight. The ride up was smoother than it had been in weeks. He could feel it in his knees, in his spine, in the way his stomach did not shift with the start. He told himself it was luck, or a temporary patch. He told himself the man had been guessing and had guessed right, by grace or by chance. He told himself many things to keep the splinter quiet. But the numbers on the panel climbed with gentle certainty, and the hum behind the walls felt like the sound of someone breathing easy at last. At the top, the elevator opened to his private lobby. A wall of glass showed the city spread out in cold blue light. The river was a black ribbon. Bridges were chains of small suns. He had built this view. He had chosen every stone, every plant, every hidden speaker that pushed soft music into the air. He should have stepped out and gone home. He should have called his driver, let the car carry him through empty streets while he closed his eyes and tasted victory again in the back of his throat. Instead, he stayed in the elevator, listening. He did not know what exactly he wanted to hear. Maybe a new rattle. Maybe proof that the fix was fragile, laughable beneath him. He heard nothing, only the calm, even breath of a machine at peace. He stepped into his office and dropped his leather folder on the desk. The sound echoed too loud. He walked to the glass and watched a few stars drown themselves in the river. In the reflection he saw his own face, sharp, well-kept, every hair right. He had trained his mouth to hold power like a blade, but the splinter did not care for training. It pressed in, asking a small question. Alone, unseen, unpraised, why did that matter? He remembered the humming, that quiet tune in Samuel's throat. Not for applause, not for show. A man keeping time with himself while he worked a problem to the bone. Charles had built a life where every fix had a price and a press release. He had never needed to hum through the dark to get something working again. He told himself he deserved that. He told himself everyone could have it if they tried hard enough. But he had also hired 3 engineers to fix this elevator over the last month, and they had left him with invoices and excuses. Tonight, a janitor had found the truth in 15 minutes. He sat in his chair and lifted his phone. His thumb hovered over a name. Head of Facilities. He could call and demand to know why the system failed and why a janitor had the only hands with sense in them. He could threaten, fire, replace. He could do the big thing that looks like leadership when fear wears a suit. But he did not press call. He put the phone down. He leaned back and closed his eyes. He could still see the rag wiping the steel. A small, loving motion. He felt foolish for noticing. He felt something else too, something he did not have a word for. He rose again and walked back to the elevator, like a man returning to a question he had left half-answered. On the way down, he watched the numbers fall, and the smoothness felt like quiet applause. When the doors parted, the lobby was even emptier than before. The storm had moved on. The glass doors whispered with a thin breeze. A single floor lamp still burned near the far wall. Samuel was there, not at the elevator now. At the baseboards, working a stubborn stain with a brush as soft as a toothbrush, patient as a parent. His shoulders moved slowly, left and right like a tide. "You live far from here?" The words surprised Charles. He meant them to be casual. They came out heavy. Samuel looked up, the same steady eyes. "Not far, sir. A few stops on the late bus." He returned to the stain, dabbing, waiting, wiping, a rhythm as sure as the earlier humming. "You shouldn't be here this late," Charles said again, the way a man returns to a safe script. "There are schedules, shifts," Samuel nodded. "I'll be done soon." The morning crew rushes past this corner. They don't see it, and when sun hits it, it shines wrong. He smiled as if sharing a secret with the floor. "I like when things start the day right." There was no challenge in his voice. No plea, no bitterness. Even his smile was small, as if he kept it for himself. The splinter pressed deeper. Charles searched for something to say that would put everything back where it belonged. Money, order, titles. He found nothing. He stood there, a very rich man without a useful sentence. He checked his watch, though he had nowhere to go that could not wait. He turned half away and stopped again, caught by the sight of the elevator in the corner of his eye. The stainless steel doors were clear enough to hold a faint ghost of his reflection. Behind the ghost was the gleam Samuel's rag had left. A machine did not care about dignity. A door did not care who wiped it. But he did. Why? He tasted the answer and pushed it back, the way a man refuses water so he can tell himself he is not thirsty. He tucked his hands into his pockets and nodded once, a nod that meant nothing and everything all at once. "Good night," he said, and walked toward the glass doors. When the wind from outside brushed his face, it felt colder than the lobby. He paused with his hand on the push bar, listening. The building had gone back to sleep. Small clang was gone. The hum was honest and low. He could step into the street and forget the janitor's name by morning. He could let the splinter work itself out and fall to the floor of his mind. He could keep his life smooth. He stood there, a long breath, 2, 3. He did not move. Behind him he heard the tiniest sound. Not metal now, cloth, the soft slide of a rag folding in a careful hand. He turned his head. Samuel was looking at the elevator, not at him, as if giving thanks for a small victory, and then letting it go. Charles did not know why that sight felt like a door opening in a place inside him that had no handle. He pushed the glass bar and stepped into the night, but the night did not swallow the feeling. It walked beside him to the curb. It rode with him in the back seat when the driver arrived. It climbed with him all the way up the dark sky to his penthouse. And when he finally stood at the window looking down at the river, the city lights blinking like tired eyes, that feeling was still there, quiet but sharp, like a question that would not stop asking. He tried to name it and failed. He tried to forget it and couldn't. He closed his eyes and saw a faded blue uniform, steady hands, a small hum in the dark. Somewhere in his chest, something shifted, not enough to show, just enough to be felt. He opened his eyes and the city kept shining back. But all he could hear was the soft memory of a machine whirring to life and a voice saying, "I am maintenance tonight." And he wondered, for the first time in years, what else he had not seen, standing right there in his own light. Morning did not arrive with sunlight. It arrived with whispers. The Levington Tower woke like a gossiping city, the story moving from the security desk to the coffee line, from the elevator banks to the 12th floor break room where the windows faced the river. A janitor fixed the billionaire's private elevator, alone, at midnight. People said it in different ways, with raised brows and half smiles and little laughs that covered surprise. They said his name, Samuel Brooks, like they had known it all along, though most had only nodded at him before. The lobby gleamed. The marble smelled faintly of lemon oil. The day moved, but every step carried the rumour forward. Charles heard it first, in the muted tone of his assistant, who brought his coffee in with a grin that died at the door. "Busy morning," she murmured, and looked down. He didn't ask. He didn't need to ask. The words drifted through the walls like steam. Janitor. Fixed. Billionaire's elevator. Alone. Midnight. He stood by his office glass and watched the floor beneath him as if it were a stage. Samuel moved from corner to corner with a steady pace, mop and cloth, quiet tools of quiet men. He greeted the security guard with a nod, helped an intern with a box too heavy for Pride, held a door with his foot so a woman could pass with a stack of folders taller than her hope. He never walked like he was being watched. He never looked up to see who watched him. He did the same work he had done before the story spread. The same care, the same patience. The elevator that had betrayed Charles so many times now sang a soft, clean hum with every trip, and that song beat against the billionaire's ribs until he spoke to the empty air.
"Coincidence," he said.
"Temporary." He told the word to the window. The window did not answer. He tried to drown it in numbers. He opened reports, redesigns, forecasts. He spoke into a call about international holdings and spoke well, clipped and sharp, his voice like a tool that never slipped. But in the spaces between sentences, his eyes slid back to the glass and to the man below. He saw a kind of order he did not pay for. A man who straightened a rug because the room breathed better that way. A man who moved a plant 2 inches to the left and then stepped back and smiled at the balance. It made something under Charles's collar feel tight. Profit had taught him to love speed. Here was another gospel. Take your time and things will last. He told himself the tower had a maintenance contract. He told himself he hired the best. He told himself this story would fade by lunch, replaced by a new rumor about a new face on a new floor. But at noon, the elevator doors opened with perfect grace, and 2 engineers stepped out, hired weeks ago for this exact problem, faces stiff, toolbox shiny and useless. They stood at the lobby desk, signed out, and left without a word.
Everyone noticed.
No one said it out loud. The silence pressed against Charles like a hand on his chest. Late that night, he came back. He told the driver he had left papers on his desk. He told himself the city was easier to handle in the dark. He stepped into the lobby and found the building in its favorite mood. Quiet. And there was Samuel again, bent over a floor sign he had placed near a wet strip of marble no one would have seen until they slipped. He looked up, working eyes, gentle mouth. He did not seem tired. He seemed present, as if he had brought all of himself to this midnight place. Charles heard his own shoes click. He heard the soft whisper of the air vents. He heard his own voice and did not recognize it as it came out softer than he planned. Why do you bother fixing things no one notices? Samuel rested the mop handle against his shoulder and let a breath settle. He didn't answer right away. He let the question live in the air until it made a space for truth. Because broken things deserve patience, sir.
Even when people don't. The words landed simple.
They did not aim to be wise.
They just were.
The line ran through Charles like cool water. He remembered boardrooms where men argued over pennies while people wept over dollars in the world outside. He pushed the thought down and felt it rise again, stubborn. Pride stepped in like a guard between him and that feeling. Pride told him to test, to prove, to push this quiet man into a bright circle and watch him stumble. Pride said it was leadership to measure what the rumor praised. So when the lobby fountain began to spit and cough the next afternoon, a glitch in its polished throat, Charles did not call the company on retainer. He stepped into the center of the lobby at noon when the building was full and voices were biggest and eyes were everywhere. He lifted a hand. The room hushed in pieces, conversation dropping in little squares around him. He looked at Samuel, who stood near the elevator with a cloth in his hand. "You," Charles said, voice steady, tone cool. "Since you're so talented, fix that." He pointed at the fountain. The word talented hung with teeth, heads turned. Phones slid out and tilted low. A few people smiled the cruel smile of spectators. The security guard shifted on his feet and then stood still. This was not his fight. The engineers were nowhere to be seen. The air felt thinner for everyone but the one man in the faded blue uniform. Samuel did not glance at the crowd. He did not swallow hard. He set the cloth down, walked over and knelt as if he were entering a place of prayer. He listened first, not to Charles, to the machine, to the cough in the pump. He placed his palm flat on the stone edge, feeling for a tremor only hands like his can read. He pressed 2 fingers against the side panel and found the seam. He unscrewed the panel with a small tool from his pocket. People leaned. The water sputtered once, as if embarrassed. "Do you need help?" Charles asked, too loud, as if volume could make the moment his. Samuel shook his head once, not rude, just sure. He traced a frayed wire, the coil hidden behind polished stone, and his face softened with understanding. He did not hurry. He tested, waited, tested again. "You see?" Someone whispered near the desk. "He's guessing." Another whispered, "This is going to be bad." The words touched Samuel and slid off like rain. He reached into the bag he carried always and drew out a small connector, not company property, his own, the kind of thing that says a man prepares for problems nobody else believes in. He cleaned the contact, crimped the wire, checked the seal, shut the panel. He stood slowly, wiped his hands and looked at the fountain like a doctor who knows a heart will find its rhythm again if you give it a second. Water moved. A thin arc rose, then fell. Another followed, higher, then a third, fuller, until the fountain found its voice, a round, quiet song that filled the lobby and pulled breath from the chests watching. The pool smoothed. The lights beneath the water caught and held, like small stars finally told they could shine. The moment stretched, fragile and bright. It could have ended there, with a few claps and a few nods, and that harmless kind of praise that dissolves before it reaches the door. But the room stayed still. Charles felt heat rise in his neck that was not anger and not gratitude. It was something in between, something he did not want anyone to see. He forced a smile without weight. "Well," he said, "good." He didn't look at Samuel when he said it. He looked at the reflection in the water, saw his own face rippled and strange. Behind that ghost, he saw a man in blue who had made the building right again, with care and time and a handful of tools. A clerk near the elevators started to clap. It was only 2 beats before she stopped herself, as if she had stepped on a sacred floor with dirty shoes. Samuel gave her a small nod that let her off the hook. He picked up his cloth, turned toward the elevator, and made for the streak he had been cleaning before the test. He did not linger in the praise. He did not hold his hands up to the crowd. He went back to work as if repair was not a show but a calling. The sound of the fountain hid the sound of several swallowed words. People returned to their screens and their steps, but something in the air had shifted, like a picture frame straightened on a wall you have looked at, crooked for years. Charles stood there longer than he knew how to justify. He felt smaller, and the feeling did not shame him. It scared him. Smaller meant seeing more. Smaller meant asking what else he had missed, because he thought he already knew. He thought of the engineers who had billed him and left. He thought of a man who carried his own parts because he believed in being ready. He tried to gather his old certainty around his shoulders, but it hung loose like a coat that no longer fits. He walked back to his office with his hands tight at his sides. Through the glass, he watched Samuel finish the streak, remove the floor sign, and gently reposition the velvet rope that guided people away from danger they did not see. The fountain sang. The phones forgot. But the story had changed in a way no rumor could measure. It was inside him now, like a slow, clear bell, ringing behind everything he did. He opened a file and stared at a page until the letters loosened and fell out of the lines. Outside, rain began to tap the windows. Inside, the elevator moved up and down, smooth as a promise kept. Charles closed his eyes a second and saw a hand wipe water from stone, a patient hand, a hand that knew how to wait. When he opened them, the city felt different, and he did not yet know if that was good. He did know this. Tomorrow would come, and with it another problem, another scene, another choice about which voice to trust, the loud one that flatters pride, or the quiet one that fixes what breaks. He told himself he had only tested the man. He told himself it was nothing. But as he stood to close his office door, he heard the fountain laugh once more, a sound like truth. And he knew the test had not been his for Samuel. It had been Samuel's for him. The answer was still moving through his chest, looking for a place to rest. The thunder came first, a deep, rolling growl that made the tall windows tremble. Then the lights blinked once, twice, and vanished. The Levington Tower, the pride of steel and glass that reached over the sleeping city, sank into darkness. Charles Levington stood in his office, frozen, as alarms screamed through the floors. The glow from his monitor flickered and died, leaving only his reflection in the black screen. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt small inside his own kingdom. He grabbed his phone. No signal. He pressed the intercom. Silence. The hum of the building's heart was gone. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. He took a step toward the door, muttering to himself. Backup should have kicked in. But the hall outside was a tunnel of shadow, red lights pulsing faintly from the stairwell, useless against the dark. He was about to shout when a beam of light cut through the gloom. "Stay calm, sir," said a voice, low and even. The flashlight found his face. Samuel stood there, uniform damp from rain, a small tool bag slung across his chest. "I built these circuits years ago."
I can get the power back. Charles blinked. You built them? The words fell out before he could stop them. He wanted to sound in control, but the question trembled. The janitor didn't look up. He was already moving, following wires along the wall, reading them like lines in a book only he could see.
He found a junction panel, opened it, and began to work. The rain outside hit the glass in hard bursts, thunder answering thunder. Every few seconds, Samuel's flashlight caught his hands, scarred, precise, steady. The man spoke softly to himself, a rhythm that reminded Charles of that night in the elevator. Humming, patience, focus. He stood back and watched. For the first time, he wasn't looking down at this man. He was looking toward him. "You're telling me," Charles said slowly, "you know this system better than the people I hired to install it?" Samuel smiled without looking up. "I helped design it, sir, before I wore this uniform." His tone was factual, not proud. The billionaire frowned. "You're an engineer?" "Was," Samuel answered. He tightened a wire, twisted another, checked a circuit with a small meter. The flashlight beam shook slightly with the hum of thunder, but his hands never missed. "My wife got sick. Medical bills took everything. After she passed, no one wanted to hire a man who'd been out of work for years. So I came here. A janitor's job doesn't ask for your past." He looked up then, the beam catching his eyes, tired but kind, honest. "But I still know how to fix what's broken." For a moment, Charles didn't speak. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, but it wasn't confidence this time, it was disbelief. The silence filled with the rhythm of tools and rain. He watched Samuel reconnect the main line, seal the junction, and close the panel. "Try the lights, sir," Samuel said, stepping aside. Charles reached for the switch, expecting nothing. The moment his finger touched it, the ceiling lights bloomed to life, one by one, down the hall, through the lobby, across the whole floor. The elevator dinged softly in the distance, alive again. The alarm stuttered once and went silent. The tower breathed again. He turned slowly. Samuel was standing by the panel, coiling the wires, his face calm. You did that by hand?" Charles asked. The words came out like a whisper. The janitor nodded. Power doesn't like panic, sir. You listen, you wait, you find the quiet point, and it comes back. He smiled faintly. People are the same way. Charles couldn't look away. The man who mopped his marble floors had rebuilt the nervous system of his tower in 10 minutes. The man whose name he barely remembered had restored what his engineers couldn't even diagnose. He searched for something to say, something that would make him sound like himself again, but nothing came. Only the truth sat between them, heavy and shining. "Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" Charles finally said. Samuel shrugged. "Didn't seem to matter. Titles don't fix what's broken. Work does." The simplicity of it hit harder than thunder. Charles stared at him, the steady breath, the modest eyes, the quiet strength, and for the first time the walls of his power felt thin. The lights flickered once more, steadied and stayed bright. Samuel tested a switch, nodded with satisfaction, then turned to go. Charles took a step forward. "Wait." The word came out quick, almost desperate. "You said you built these
circuits. That means when I bought this building." "Yes, sir," Samuel said gently.
"My designs were part of the original plan, but my name wasn't on the papers. Companies buy ideas, not people." The sentence landed like a stone dropped into water, soft, then endless ripples. Charles opened his mouth, closed it again. He wanted to apologize, but for what? For the system that made this man invisible, for the arrogance that had called him maintenance, as if that were small, for never asking. He didn't know which sin was heavier. Samuel picked up his flashlight. "Everything's stable now," he said. "You should have full power till morning." He started toward the stairwell, steps quiet, calm. Charles called after him. "Why not leave? Why stay here?" Samuel paused at the door. "Because this building still needs fixing, sir."
"And so do some of the people in it." He nodded once and disappeared into the dark stairwell, the light bobbing away until it was gone. Charles stood alone under the bright, humming ceiling. The silence after Samuel's footsteps faded was different this time.
Not peaceful, not cold, just honest. He looked at his reflection in the window, but it didn't look like him. The lines of pride on his face were sharper now, drawn by shame more than power. He walked to the elevator and pressed the button. It opened instantly, smooth and obedient. Inside, the walls gleamed, the same walls Samuel had polished 100 times. The billionaire stepped in, staring at his faint reflection in the mirrored steel, seeing two faces, his own and the man's shadow behind it. As the doors slid shut, he whispered the name to himself, like a prayer he'd forgotten how to say. Samuel Brooks. The elevator began to rise, silent and perfect. The hum under his feet was steady, strong, alive. And for once, Charles didn't think about profits or prestige. He thought about patience. He thought about broken things that still worked if someone cared enough to listen. He thought about the kind of man who could lose everything and still hum through the dark while making the world light again. By the time the elevator reached the top floor, the storm outside had ended. The city lights blinked like new stars. The building stood taller somehow, not because of its design, but because of the man who had fixed it. Charles stepped out slowly, every echo of his shoes reminding him that his tower might have been built with money, but it stood tonight because of a janitor's hands. He turned off the lights one by one until only the glow of the city remained. For a moment, he imagined what Samuel's life had been. The hospital halls, the nights alone, the job applications ignored. He felt the sharp edge of guilt cut through his chest. And then, underneath that guilt, something else. Respect. In the quiet of his penthouse, Charles whispered again, "He built my tower." The words weren't about pride anymore, they were confession. And as he stood looking down at the building, that hummed steady and bright, he realized the truth. The most powerful thing in the world wasn't wealth, it was quiet strength that refused to disappear. Morning light spilled through the glass walls of the boardroom, soft but relentless. It found the polished table, the sharp suits, the silver watches. It found Charles Levington at the head of the room, silent for once. Around him, executives shuffled papers, whispering about the outage from the night before. The building had gone dark, they said. The system failed. Then someone somehow had restored it. The words, "a janitor," floated through the room like a rumor that dared to become truth. Charles let them speak. He didn't stop them. He didn't correct them. He waited until the murmurs became still. He stood. The sound of his chair scraping the floor drew every eye. "Before we begin," he said quietly, "I want to talk about last night." A few nervous laughs flickered. The billionaire didn't laugh back. This building failed. But it wasn't the storm that saved it. It was a man most of you walk past every day without seeing. He paused, looked toward the glass doors. "Samuel Brooks, could you come in, please?" The room turned. Samuel stepped in, uniform pressed, hands folded. He stood near the wall, not wanting to interrupt. His eyes met no one's. He didn't need to. Charles nodded at him. "This is the man who fixed my elevator when engineers couldn't. The man who brought back power when this tower fell into darkness. The man who, years ago, designed half of the circuits that run this building." A long silence followed.
Someone coughed. Another looked down.
"From today," Charles said, voice steady, "he is no longer our janitor. He is chief maintenance engineer of Levington Industries." For a second, no one clapped. The shock was too real, the shift too sudden. Then, from the far end of the table, a slow rhythm began. One pair of hands, then two, then all. The applause grew until it filled the glass room and spilled into the hallway. Samuel's face did not change much. He smiled once, briefly, the way a man does when his heart is full and quiet. Charles felt something inside his chest loosen for the first time in years. Pride without arrogance, gratitude without fear. After the meeting, the hallway emptied. Charles found Samuel back in the lobby, polishing the same elevator doors that had brought them together. The reflection was clear enough for both of them to see themselves, side by side, billionaire and janitor, no longer strangers. "You change more than my building," Charles said softly. Samuel didn't stop polishing. "Sometimes, sir, we're just fixing the circuits people forget exist," he said.
"In machines and in hearts." He looked up, eyes calm, patient.
"Most things break because no one listens to them anymore." Charles nodded slowly. He wanted to say thank you, but the words felt too small. Instead, he just stood there, letting the silence carry what language couldn't. The fountain murmured nearby, water running smooth and steady again. Somewhere above, the elevator chimed, doors opening to another floor, another day. Life was moving, but differently now. Quieter. Kinder. That night, in his penthouse, Charles stood at the window again. The city stretched before him, every street a vein of light. He could see his tower, a single beam in the skyline, steady and whole. He thought about the years he'd spent counting profits, chasing perfection, measuring worth by what could be bought. And then he thought of Samuel's hands, steady in the dark, fixing what no one else would touch. He whispered into the glass, "Never judge a man by the job he holds, but by the light he carries." He turned off the lamp and let the city's glow fill the room. The hum of the elevator far below reached him faintly through the walls, a soft, living sound. It was not just a machine running smoothly now. It was a reminder that everything built with arrogance eventually breaks, but everything touched by patience learns how to heal. Charles closed his eyes and saw the faint image of Samuel's face reflected in the steel, calm and unbothered, as if he had known all along that dignity can't be stolen, only ignored. The lesson sat quietly in the billionaire's heart. True wealth isn't counted in towers or titles. It's found in the people who keep the lights on when the world goes dark. And down in the lobby, long after everyone had gone, Samuel Brooks made one final round through the silent building. He checked the locks, straightened the mats, wiped one last fingerprint from the glass. Then he stood before the elevator, the same one that had broken, the same one that had revealed everything. He pressed the button and watched the doors open smooth and perfect. For a moment he smiled, not at the machine, but at what it had brought back to life. He stepped inside, the doors closed, and the light above the frame glowed warm and steady. The elevator moved upward, quiet and sure, carrying a man whose worth was never in question, only waiting to be seen.